Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on another episode of the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Here's a quick question for you, and be honest now. How much time per day is your phone in your hand? According to recent data that I just checked, the average smartphone user checks their device 63 times a day. I bet it's a lot more than that, but 22% of us are checking our devices every few minutes, while over half look at their phone a few times per hour. Every time we do this, it interrupts ourselves. And for those of you who are more artistically inclined, and I know there are a lot of you, musicians and artists of all sorts of different types and creators, you know that uninterrupted work time is absolutely precious, even if you're just thinking or drawing or writing. These times, I wouldn't have written a book or several books or done all these podcasts if my notifications had been on my phone bleeping and blooping at me all day. It would be impossible to record. So anyway, putting it into perspective a little bit as someone who records, imagine that even if you don't, imagine that you do. Imagine that you're recording a podcast for one day, just all day long, something is recording. What are you doing with your time, and how many times are you checking in on your device? How many bleeps and bloops are interrupting your day and interrupting your story? If your life were a documentary or you were on your own reality show, how many times would you check your phone? Would you be embarrassed about it? I think a lot of us would, including myself. But there are many things you can do to help improve the situation and adapt to this modern world. So we're here with our friend Aaron Alexander to help figure it all out. Aaron is a pioneering manual therapist and movement coach whose clients range from A-list Hollywood celebs to pro athletes and pretty much everyone in between. Aaron is author of the new Align Method book and host of the top-rated Align podcast, which you should definitely check out. We just did a little podcast swap, so I have an episode over there and he's got an episode over here. So if you like this one, if you like Fat Burning Man, make sure you check out the Align podcast too. On today's show, we're chatting about the importance of getting outdoors to increase creativity and reduce stress, how to increase muscle growth without compromising balance, and why you should get out of your chair and play like a kid. But before we get there, here's a note that just came in from Danielle. She says, "Hello, my name is Danielle, and I wanted to say thank you so much for doing what you do. I stumbled upon your podcast, and it completely changed not only my life, but my husband's also. I have 5 different autoimmune diseases and a panic disorder. My husband was a type 2 diabetic. We've been at it for 6 months. I'm down 30 pounds and my husband is down 40 pounds. I currently have no trouble with pain and have not had a panic attack in a long time. No medication needed either. My husband is no longer diabetic and off all meds. Our hardest part was our job because we deliver trucks all across the country. The food options were terrible. So we bought a cooler and have found that it really works well for us. We also bought a crock pot that plugs into the truck that we plan to start using as the cold months set in. I am so grateful to have all the info you and your guests have given me. I can only imagine how many lives you have saved and will continue to save with what you do. I may not have been in a hospital bed dying, but we were killing ourselves slowly, and you have definitely helped turn that around. Thank you again." Many, many exclamation points. Danielle, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening and putting all of this in action, because as someone who drives around the country very often with my wife, Allison, I can relate to this so much that I probably have the same little plug-in oven crock pot that you have that plugs into the truck. But no matter what, even if you're in a food desert, even if you're driving across the country, we've done it many times. Like I said, you can still maintain your health. You can still eat right. You can still be clean. Usually it just takes a little bit of preparation. But look at this. I mean, if you're off all your meds, you're saving money, you're going to improve your long-term outlook, basically, of health, because every prescription med comes with side effects, and a lot of these side effects are not pleasant. They're not what you want. So when you kick all that stuff out like I did, I can vouch for it. It really does help. So I love getting messages like this. If you're out there and you have something to share with me, the best way to get in touch is definitely to email me at abel@fatburningman.com. So all of you out there, don't forget to bring your cooler, pack up some healthy foods in advance. And also one quick tip: if you are on the road and you run out of food or you didn't have time to prepare, instead of going to a restaurant that serves a bunch of greasy GMO oils or rancid oils, lots of fried stuff, or MSG in their sauces, too much salt, whatever, just like most restaurants, go to a grocery store instead of a restaurant. Make yourself a salad, grab some cheese, some really delicious cheese for way less money than you'd spend at the restaurant. Get some nuts. These are the things that we do. And the longer we do it, the more it just kind of becomes ingrained as a habit, because as soon as we eat out and do some sort of cheat thing by accident or on purpose, you pay for it in one way or another. You pay for it. So anyway, I am really proud of you, Danielle, and your husband. Please give him an extra big hug for me. So how about you? If you want to try the Wild Diet yourself, I have some very good news, because we just knocked $50 off our New Year Wild 30 challenge. So if you want to get ahead of the game and sign up for the early bird access, get it for half price. Sign up now at fatburningman.com/challenge. That's fatburningman.com/challenge. We did our very best to plan out all of this for you after living this lifestyle for many years, making a lot of mistakes. We've tried to streamline the process for you as much as possible so that you can take your health back, and it's more important than ever. So just head on over to join us at fatburningman.com/challenge. The challenge usually costs $100, but like I said, if you sign up soon, you'll get $50 off. All right, on to the show with Aaron Alexander. In this episode, we're chatting about how to handle smartphones in a very crazy time, how to focus on movements that will get you real results, why you should get out of your chair and play like a little kid or a very weird adult, and tons more. All right, before we get to the show, a quick note that I'll be sharing, like in the past episodes and some episodes to come, I'll be sharing new bits of poetry from my brand spanking new book, which is now a #1 bestseller in humor and poetry in multiple countries around the world. It's called Designer Babies Still Get Scabies. So make sure you hang on till the end of this podcast and you'll hear all of the new stuff. All right, let's go hang out with Aaron. All right, folks, Aaron Alexander is a pioneering manual therapist and movement coach whose clients range from A-list Hollywood celebrities to pro athletes and everyone in between. He's author of the new Align Method book and host of the top-rated Align podcast, which is way more spiritual than it sounds. So, my friend Aaron, thanks for being here, man. This is going to be fun.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I've been paying attention to your stuff for, I don't know, at least 5 years. So it's an honor to be here, man. I appreciate it.
You're aging yourself.
Yeah,
you're
right.
Mostly aging me, but you're aging yourself too.
Yeah, right. Oh my God, he's over 5 years old.
No, so I wanted to start with this one because it seems like it's getting worse and worse, but it certainly can't go on forever. In this modern dystopia of stooping and smartphones, when is it ever going to get better, and what do we do about it? Because people's necks are literally crooked at this point, and yeah. People are super jacked up.
Yeah. Well, so I think for one thing, I think that the smartphone and all of that is a symptom of something deeper, and mainly the addiction to the smartphone and to the notifications and the Zeigarnik effect and all that stuff, and needing to get to those undone tasks of your day, which is what the Zeigarnik effect means. So underneath that, I think when you are in a place where you feel supported by community and you feel like you have purpose and you feel driven and you feel, lit up with your life, all of a sudden the phone and the tablet and all that stuff loses power and you kind of forget that it exists. And when we drift away from that place of, like Joseph Campbell, following your bliss, feeling like you're on purpose, feeling like connected with something more, then all of a sudden, power gets puffed back into the phone.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of that conversation. And the other, just mechanical aspect, which lends itself to that, because the way that you move in your body affects the way that you think and the way that you feel, which I have all research in the book about that.
Yeah.
From there, we can use our technology responsibly. And the way that we do that is that we don't just collapse our shoulders and forward head posture and kind of be pulled into the phone like it's like this black hole sucking all of our attention and our physical structure. So something really simple is you can, as you're using the phone, you can just like hinge your hips forward a little bit, keep your spine nice and long, and kind of actually make it be almost like a yoga practice in a sense as you're using your phone, as opposed to just collapsing into it.
Right.
Another thing that's interesting would be to put the phone down on like a counter as you're using it, as opposed to having all that radiation EMF stuff pouring into your wrist all day long. So put the phone down for a second, get your spine nice and long, hinge yourself over that counter, use the phone from that position. And then, there's more. Put the phone on airplane mode more regularly, download podcasts and music and all that stuff. Those are just a few basic options.
Yeah. I like the low-tech ones too. I have like an iPod Shuffle that's got to be at least 10 years old. It doesn't have a screen on it or anything. And I love those old things that just work, and they don't have to like notify you and download new software updates, just like hijack your internet and all this stuff. It's really gotten crazy, and we find so many of us are serving the technology instead of the technology serving us, I think we find. But do you have a feeling for how much worse phones are than maybe books? Because people really freaked out when books really took off too, that they would turn everyone's mind to jelly or applesauce or whatever the parlance was back then.
Yeah, I think it was like Socrates or Plato. They warned against the evils of literature. Yeah, and that it would suck us out of or take us away from our own capacity to memorize and be able to think for ourselves, because now we're always going to be consuming this literature and memorizing this stuff on pages. Right. And so it is interesting right now. I think that the tendency, like narcissistically, is for us to have the belief system that our generation is the end of the world. Right. Totally. So right now our experience, like cell phone and the technological revolution, all that stuff. It's like, oh my God, it's like this will move, like this too shall pass. Yeah. At some point we'll probably look back and have these similar conversations about what they thought about books in relation to phones. But it is interesting, man. There's an interesting book called The Medium is the Massage by Marshall McLuhan that I'm sure you would really appreciate if you haven't checked it out. Read that one. So his thing was that the medium is the message, was his like big statement within that. And it's that the medium that you are gathering your information from, for example, like you being in a school system where you are sitting at a desk staring into a tablet now, in this case, like with the present day, or books or whatever, then you are shuffling through the halls under these artificial lights and the air-conditioned rooms and all of those things. We think about, they're learning chemistry and mathematics and history, but that's for the most part just minutia. That's just details. The medium that's truly teaching the students inside of those spaces is actually what's forming their bodies, forming their minds, forming their emotions and everything. And so I think it's a very fascinating thing to just witness. The reason I wrote the book, in which I appreciate you, it seems like you read the book or read like at least a good percentage of it. I kind of wrote it in like Instagram posts. They're like extended Instagram posts, but like the longest section is, before you get to another bold point is, maybe 5 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs or so, because the medium of education that modern people have been exposed to with cell phones and stuff is like, if I can't get information from it that's meaningful and impactful within, 15 seconds, I'm out of here. Yeah. And it's just very fascinating. Whereas if this book was written maybe 100 years ago, it would be like, okay, let's go long form, baby. Like, we're going to go in on this. Yeah. But it's just very interesting to witness how the way that we are formed by our environments, and the cell phone is a primary kind of structural change that's happened.
Yeah, and it changes the way we behave, what we crave, what we think. It puts us into a different psychological state. But I know that you're a big fan of doing things in your environment that take you out of that kind of consumptive state, right? That frazzled, crazy, what's next? What's next? What's next? Well, I need to do this crazed state that so many people are in right now. We were talking before we started recording about some of the instruments that you have, for example, just like lying around your house. Talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So in my home, in one of the chapters in the book, it's, I think it's in the aligned home, how to align your home. So you get into like aligning your travel situation, your office and all that. Like your environment forms you. You can think of yourself. It's like you're being pressed into a mold, so when you go into somebody's home, and you see, a big coffee table and then a big couch and then a TV on the wall and, then a dinner table with chairs around it. And like you have a sense of the shape of the bodies that will inhabit that space.
Totally.
They're going to,
I can see you seeing it that way. Yeah.
You're like, okay, like this is going to, this will shape you.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend is in your place of inhabitants, wherever those places happen to be, is make it more comfortable to spend time on the ground. For one thing, I'll get to the instruments part, but make it comfortable to be on the ground, because then you're naturally going to take your hips and your knees and your ankles through that full range of motion to get up and down, which circulates lymphatic fluid and blood and interstitial fluids, and it heals your body. It's like an onboard healing mechanism that your body naturally has, just going through that up and down range of motion. Not to mention it's better for digestion, all sorts of things. But on top of that, you utilize instruments as a form of art in your home, because it's something that you can actually activate and you can actually utilize, and you can, you want to interact with art. So in my home, I have a didgeridoo and I have a djembe and I have a flute and I have a guitar and ukulele and, I have this little shaker rattle thing.
Wow.
And there's nothing that brings people together faster than connecting through music, through art, through anything that's sub-language. Because as long as we're in that sublingual, I guess it'd be like under your tongue, but like
right, I know what you mean.
under language.
Words are squiggly like that.
Words are squiggly, man. That's Alan Watts' reference. Yeah, words are very squiggly, and they can be very deceptive.
Yeah.
But what's far less deceptive is the sounds that come out of you through music or through dance or through poetry. In your case, with the Designer Babies book. So the more that we can instill that into our lives, ideally our environment is a form of medicine. So just your existence in your home or in your office or in your travel or anywhere that you put your body or your family's bodies, it's like it's healing you, as opposed to us martyring ourselves for the sake of paying bills and becoming more, powerful in the social hierarchy.
Yeah. One thing that I heard you just mention that I also appreciate about your work is that like you're a big, strong, powerful dude. But a lot of the stuff you talk about isn't just like giant power lifts and you got to deadlift and you got to do all this stuff with weight and, like really punish yourself. It's really about you got to get up and down off the floor. You got to take deep breaths. You got to breathe through your nose. You're taking it back. So why is that important in this day and age?
For me, I think that you certainly realize this as well, as like a content creator in quotations, or someone that creates stuff for people to listen to or watch, whatever.
Thanks for not saying influencer.
Yeah, right, exactly. I'm looking for deficits, and I'm also looking for barriers to entry, and what will people actually do? And I don't think people are going to start pistol squatting with kettlebells over their heads, or nor do they need to.
Sure.
For the most part, everything that we need to heal our bodies is, with us right now in the rooms that we're at. It's if you put yourself in a blank room, or a grassy park someplace, you have all the tools you need to heal your body there.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so the way that I had a co-writer called Phil White, who he's co-written with like Kelly Starrett, who did the foreword, and like Larry Hamilton and Pavel Tsatsouline, and all these great people. So he was a huge asset for the book.
Yeah.
But the way that we created it, the first analogy in the introduction is that your life or your physical experience is kind of like a golfer hitting a golf ball, and the club face, if it's angled just a centimeter any direction, you won't notice the trajectory change in the ball within the first 40 yards or so, but within 80 yards, 90 yards, you're like, oh, wow, that ball is landing wherever it lands based off of that very initial club face position. And what I see, and I'm sure you see as well, in the modern world, it seems like our club face is like a little bit askew.
Right.
And so essentially what we did with the book was how can we kind of draw back and make these micro adjustments in our momentary day-to-day life to have huge impact in, not just today, but, 10 years, 50 years, all the way through our lives.
Yeah. I was glad too that you put the pull-up bar in there, even the doorway ones, because I hear some people in fitness circles just totally rip on them. They're just like, oh, it's unstable, it's bad for your doors, or it's just like you're gonna hurt yourself. And I'm sure for some people that's true, but at least for me, that's probably, I've had that for at least 10 years in different forms of pull-up bars, all sorts of different kinds, and I think it's one of the very best things. I've had back problems ever since I was too small to play football, which I did for a short period of time, and just got squashed and kind of messed up my shoulder. And so if I don't do the hangs and the pulls and that movement and really strengthen the back instead of the front, I feel it. And that's one reason I work out actually is because I feel so much worse when I don't. I can feel my body kind of being pulled into this different position that feels like it's getting worse every day instead of better.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole book that is called Shoulder Pain ? By a guy called Dr. John Kirsch. He's an orthopedic surgeon that he was seeing patients for, to have them do surgeries with him. And he was like, I have a feeling that if you just took your shoulder joint through its natural range of motion on a regular basis and just decompressed it with a simple hang of, in the book, we recommend 1.5 minutes each day. And people, I highly recommend people at home try just for the next 10 days, hang off of something for 1.5 minutes in total. So that could be like 15 seconds, 6 times, or however you want to do that.
Yeah.
And what he found was a staggering percentage of the people that were going to get shoulder surgeries for impingement were experiencing all this like debilitating pain. It would go away just by giving themselves a little dose of that decompression each day.
Wow.
It's like,
now, does that have to be weighted, or they can just move through that range of motion?
Well, so for starters, a lot of people hanging is like a complex thing, not for any kid ever.
Right.
But we lose that, and then when you do lose that, you need to maybe, give yourself some training wheels to get back to that point. So people could start, I have all this stuff in the book, like the exercise and whatnot, but you start just putting your hands up on the edge of like a chair or something and kind of hinging yourself forward, kind of like a good morning type position to just take you through that shoulder flexion or overhead range of motion. And then you could get a little stool underneath a pull-up bar to start off and do like partial weight, and then eventually do your whole weight. And then eventually you could even put like a weight vest on or something like that. But it's not necessary.
So I'm listening to this, and my parents are lovely and sometimes listen to this, but my dad, he will admit to this, like he doesn't go through those ranges of motion or like do cardio, especially now that he's retired and his work was very, very physical. How do you get people on board to especially do this stuff that's non-weighted and they can do from home without any real equipment? How do you get them to actually do it, especially later in life when they might not want to?
Yeah. There's like what's that quote? Like, a person who persists in their folly will eventually become wise. Like if you continue down the path of going against your indigenous movement patterns, eventually pain and discomfort will manifest, and you will need to create change at some point in your life, without a doubt, unless you die of some, like flash thing. Health will become the most important thing for you.
Yeah.
100%.
Yep.
And so it's like, someone that has their health has many dreams. Someone that doesn't have their health has only one. And so the sooner that you can figure that out, the sooner that you can start to really enjoy your life in a sustainable way. But I don't, like we were talking about before on my podcast right before this, like I much prefer to lead by example, and I don't think that it's my right or place to push my ideas on anybody.
Right.
And I think that in general, especially in this like modern world of like influencers and everybody's a brand, and you, even if you have nothing to say, you have to have something to say, or you know, what's your worth in the tribe. I think a wise thing to come back to is if people aren't asking you questions, you probably don't need to be giving people responses. You know,
That's fair. I think that's fair.
you know? And so, like, how do I convince people? I try my best to practice what I preach. And when people ask, then I'm like, oh, well, here's the book and here's the podcast and here it is.
Yeah. Well, it's such a simple thing that people are so resistant to, is what I'm trying to get at. Something as simple as raising your arms like above your shoulders, right? Putting your hands above your head and or getting down into a deep squat. I'm shocked by, especially in the Western world, how few people continue to do that as they age. Actually, on your show that we were just talking on too, I mentioned on my wife's side of the family, there's a grandmother, and she's 90 years old, and she is with it. She's sharp. She's moving around. Like, I'm sleepier than she is. It's amazing. But one thing that she said that she does every morning, and she's been doing this for years, decades, I believe, is for an hour every morning she stretches and does yoga and just like goes through all the ranges of motion that she can or that she's been trained to in that movement series. But what she mentioned is that she's losing a bit of balance and she's not like able to do a squat, and she's not going through that position for some reason. And so maybe you just need to like invent the next Thai bow that like really takes off and people get a hold of it and they're doing squats all the time. But what is it shame? Is that, or is it looking silly that people won't get into some of those positions that are deeply primitive and that we all need to do, but like you can't really do them in public, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah. I mean, I think in part, and shame that you're not going to do it, right? I think in large part, people don't know, they feel a bit disembodied in the sense that they don't really know if they're doing stuff right. Like, we don't really get much physical education throughout school. It's like hucking kickballs at each other's faces, and you know, there's not a lot of, ideally, literally every class that you take throughout your educational experience is physical education, because that's the way that you communicate yourself. Right. You know, that's like Albert Morabian is a professor that I reference in the book from UCLA that created this thing called the 55-38-7 principle, which is 55% of our communication comes from body language, and 38 is the tonality of our voice, which you know through music, and then 7 is the actual word. So if there's incongruence in the messages that we're communicating between our words and the other 93% of the time, people will trust your tone and your body language. Yeah. Therefore, when you are learning to be an effective human being in grade school and high school and college, literally every class, from my belief system, ought to be an embodied class. Yeah. You know, and then there's all sorts of amazing research around how physical embodiment helps with consolidation of memories and creativity. And, you know, so there's another study, I promise not to just reference studies the whole time, but that references the book of actually going through fluid movements with your hands, as opposed to just like, say, typing on a keyboard, literally induces creativity. You know, because your brain is not this organ that exists within the vacuum in between your ears. Your brain is your fingers and your feet and your sexual organs and your spine. The homunculus. You know, the homunculus is like a representation of what the kind of like the cortical real estate of where different parts are represented in your body. But yeah, exactly.
We'll have to flash that on the screen. It's creepy looking. It's really bizarre looking.
They've got like big thumbs and big face and mid-sized sexual organs, big feet. Yeah. You know, and so it's interesting within the homunculus, like you're talking about, the feet are huge. You know, and it's very interesting to think when it's like, fascinating. We have so much sensory information in our feet. Maybe there's something to that. You know, you're like reflexology, and like there's all these practices. Like, well, like your feet are represented throughout your whole body, and it stimulates your whole system. Yeah. And we you would never do that with like, you would never wear big, thick, padded gloves in your hands all day.
Right.
Because you need to be able to process information with your hands. You know, you want to have that articulation with your fingers. Feet, somehow we like missed the boat on that. We're like, you know, Nike kind of got us wearing these like raised heels and these big cushion shoes, and that's fine for a little while, but what you do not use in your biological self will atrophy to, you know, whatever degree you outsource it.
Yeah.
And so now what we need is we need to titrate back some of our own physical embodiment through small bits, which is why we broke the book down in these little tiny bits. Like practice hinging your hips more regularly, hang a little bit each day, spend a little bit of time on the ground, take more walks, notice your breathing.
Yeah.
All those things are things that we can literally do right now. They're with us right now. It doesn't cost you anything. And with time, all of a sudden, you'll gain enough momentum to do some, you know, more impressive stuff.
Even just going barefoot most of the time or trying to do that intentionally is such a massive thing for foot strength and for balance, and something that I really try to prioritize. It's a total challenge though. You know, we often will live in places for months at a time. And like right now, for instance, we have prickly pear cactus all over the place out there, and our dog gets it stuck in her pads sometimes. And it can be rough to be barefoot, but at the same time, you can wear a minimum of food so that you're still, or a minimum on your feet so that you can still sense somewhat. Like I kind of wear moccasin type things or slippers or flip flops that you can run in that are strapped on there, that you can still communicate to the ground with to some degree. But how do you manage that? Because you need to toughen up your feet. You can't just like go out there and run barefoot on asphalt because you like read a book about going barefoot running or something, which I've heard of people doing. Like you can't do that. So what's your advice for people kind of like shifting into that way of thinking, trying to strengthen your feet?
I feel like one of like the keys to life is figuring the art of living right at your boundaries and respectfully nudging them without blowing past them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something we were talking about before on the other side was, you know, it's, if we blow through it, it can look fancy on Instagram for, you know, a few months, but let's talk in 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. If you're a person that just doesn't respect your boundaries at all, it's not very sustainable. You know, so with your feet, it's just that, like, what's the hermetic stressor of, you know, maybe doing more minimalist shoes, or maybe going barefoot sometimes, or maybe you could even bring, if you have like a standing desk or something in your house, maybe you could like literally like get a big cool rock, you know, and put it underneath your desk, and you can alternate putting one foot up onto the rock for a little bit and then back down, or it could be a foam roller, or what you want to bring a rock into your house. Get some rocks for your backyard and practice just walking on those guys.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that like I moved to Hawaii when I was 18. I lived out there for you know, a little while, and we would rock run up rivers to find waterfalls, and you get good at it. And you see like some of these Hawaiian kids that grew up there since they're little babies. One, they have these big, fat, strong hobbit feet.
Yeah.
Like it looks like it's almost like weird. You're like, what's
almost grotesque, like, right? Like
you're like,
they can go
like,
this way.
Yeah, you're like,
right?
Oh, that's what feet are supposed to look like.
Right.
Like, oh,
our feet are supposed to be hands?
That's what they're supposed to look like.
Isn't
I had no
crazy?
idea.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like, imagine what you're, you know, it's like I think it's an attractive quality, especially for a man, to have like some calluses and have like paws.
Right.
I think women listening be like, yeah, like I want a man that looks like he can chop wood.
Right.
You know, when you take,
we are losing that though. A lot of people are getting a little too comfy these days.
A little too comfy, yeah, you know, but yeah, it's a similar thing with our feet. Like our feet are built for that, and if you just throw a person in that situation, it's gonna be too much too fast. But something you could do to start playing with little titrates, little drops of that, is just spend some time taking your shoes off, walk around in the grass, intentionally walk on roots are really nice. They kind of like create this little massage contour, and just make it gradual, because you don't want to blow it out. I mean, that's
takes a bit.
Yeah,
it takes a while, I would say. And actually, it seems like, especially when I live in a colder place, like we're living in the mountains of Colorado up at like 8,000 feet and have been for a while. So it gets cold in the winter. And then you especially when barefoot weather kind of kicks back in, because it's too cold for a little bit, at least for me and my little dainty toes. But then when you get back into it, you've got to go through this almost like getting back into shape. You got to toughen it up a little bit at a time. You can't have too much ego in it, or else you're going to like set yourself back and have to take 3 days off or whatever. But I kind of enjoy that. It feels like a seasonal thing that we're all supposed to do. And we like reemerge from the cave like the bears do.
Yeah, life is cyclical. I think it's good to go through that with your diet. It's also good to go through that with your movement, and to realize that this again stuff we were talking about before of the images that we see in popular media are for the most part jacked dudes or Victoria's Secret women, in this like peak form.
Right.
And we miss out on, there's not a lot of muscle and fitness magazines that you'll see like, a dude with his family sitting on the ground playing with, Legos or something like that.
Right.
But there's so much medicinal effect by that practice of community, touch, spending time on the ground, mobilizing your hips. Cultures that do spend time on the ground, so like Northern Africa or Eastern Mediterranean or Southeast Asia in particular, they have minimal to no incidence of osteoarthritis of the hips, very low incidence of OA in the knees. Pelvic floor dysfunctions is much lower. Fall risk is just not even like, what do you mean fall risk? Like risk of, I'm up and down off the ground 100 times a day. Like what is this? What are you talking about, Paul? It's like walk risk.
Yeah.
It's like walk. So in our culture, because it's more, you kind of alluded to before, of like to be on the ground is kind of more. It's like childish or dirty. The roots of our humanity are kind of childish and dirty. Playing music and dancing and all that stuff. It's like, oh, that's like child's play. But those are actually where the most healing aspects of our lives are.
Yeah,
you'd appreciate that the oldest, I believe, from what I found, the oldest instrument was found in Slovenia, and it was it's a flute that was made from the femur of a cave bear. And I thought I included that in the book, and it's, I don't know how to say it. It's like djembe or flute or something, whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought it was so interesting to think like, man, there was this dude or lady sitting in this cave 43,000 years ago, and they're probably avoiding predators, and they're looking to procreate, and they're looking to like make food or like figure out how to build a fire, whatever. And they're like, I've got this femur.
I was thinking about designing a flute.
I have this urge to make these pretty sounds come out of it.
Yeah.
And if you look at ourselves at more of like a mammalian type level, like this subconscious kind of, mainframe, what we're riding on.
Chimps with flutes.
We're chimps with flutes, man. There was something to that, before they had any kind of YouTube videos on how to build a flute, or before there was any like, this will get you laid more or whatever.
Yeah.
That was like this deep urge to create music. And it's like,
we all have that somewhere. Even the people who say that they're not musicians, like the people who say they're not singers, right? It's like
you're always singing.
It's kind of, is it like that with being a gymnast too? Because it's like all little kids are gymnasts, kind of. They don't identify. That's the problem, is identifying the yes and no.
Yeah, so I mean that's that's what I've heard in different particularly like West African culture, like around dance. Like you're always dancing. Life is a dance,
right?
And it's like, well, what does that mean? So dance is like this physical expression of movement, and so if Albert Morabian, Western science, UCLA stuff, it's like, okay, well, over half of our expression is from that body language, and dance is this expression through movement. Well, what is a conversation with somebody? And what is the gesticulation with my hands, or the positioning of my shoulders or my head or my neck or my hips? Because when you're communicating to somebody, what you are doing is you're dancing information to them.
Right.
And when they and what they are listening to is the rhythm and the pace of your dance. And so if you are more deeply in tune and connected and in yourself, in your physicality, naturally people will be more drawn to that person. People like people that are in themselves.
Yeah, in themselves, not into themselves, but like integrated with themselves, right? Like
They
aligned,
occupy
if you will.
they're aligned. They occupy all their nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
That's like this might get a little weird, but have you ever like smudged, like a smudge stick,
Yeah,
sage or
sure.
Palo Santo wood or whatever? When you do that, especially if you have like, some like tribal Native American people do it for you or something, they're pretty meticulous about getting all the nooks and crannies.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll lift your foot up and get under the foot, and then when you're going around the house, we get up in the corners and I'll blow out the closet and like under the bed, like all these places that we not just like, wow, you're like blowing smoke under the bed. Interesting. It's like, yeah, we want to clear it all out.
Yeah.
Well, that room that you're blowing that smoke through is essentially the way that we could potentially live inside of our bodies. Where we want to actually go through all of those different nooks and crannies. And this could be with movement, it could be stretching, it could be breathing, it could be just intention and visualization, like we were discussing before. Because that practice of visualization literally lights your internal circuits up at a neuromuscular level.
Yeah.
There's various different research that we again discussed before of, people become more effective at shooting free throws. People become, strong. There was a study that we mentioned of like the thumb strength. People that would just go through thumb exercises with visualizing it, not doing it at all, and actually doing the thumb exercise. They found the people that visualized and actually did the exercise would have similar gains in strength.
Yeah.
So you can internally cultivate more of a mindfulness practice and literally start to almost kind of like smudge out all the different parts of your biological house. I know that's very strange, but
I like that. We're getting a little woo. That happens sometimes.
It happens sometimes. We'll draw it back. We'll talk about nothing but research.
Let me ask you about this. Since time has gone on, we've known each other for a little while. How has the idea of body image changed for you over the years? Not only as someone who's just like an actual person, but also interacting with others, because man, people are head cases more than ever about it in this selfie culture we live in now, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so I started obsessed with bodybuilding, and I wanted to pack on as much muscle as I possibly could, as fast as I possibly could.
This is when you were like a teenager, was it?
Yeah, I grew up like in the book I describe myself as like a confused baby giraffe with like a bowl cut and buck teeth. And
that's still what you feel like, don't you? Like
well,
somewhere in there.
Now it's starting. Well, I'm also loving that boy.
Right.
I think that's a really important thing is to not move like, oh, now I'm a big man. It's like, no, man, like love your child part of you. Yeah. Like you need to, every moment that you existed in this form, ideally look back and embody all of that and love all of it. I know we're venturing out into the woo woods here.
This is good stuff.
Okay. But yeah, so I started off, I felt kind of perhaps a little bit like more unstable in my home environment. My dad got into drugs and he ended up like going to jail and such and all these things. And what that translated to was this need to overcompensate in my biological environment and pack onto my biological house. And so that turned into like lots of bodybuilding and lots of just imbalance in the form of fitness. And then there's the process of having to unwind all of that stuff to come back into a place of being actually comfortable in your own skin. And so that's the really fascinating thing is I think sometimes we temporarily think that we're getting past our insecurities by buying the new car or getting the watch that we can't afford or packing on muscles with, things or whatever your flavor of that is.
Yeah.
But eventually there will come a time where you'll have to unwind that if you want to get into something that's actually like feels more comfortable. Like your body is your home.
Yeah.
It's the most valuable home that you'll ever have. So at some point, ideally, you want to occupy a home that you can kind of kick your feet back and lay and twist and turn and, have people over and party. And you want to really enjoy that occupying yourself, and so that's been the process of unwinding all of the the patterns of just packing on muscle for the sake of people loving me essentially, and getting into more of a place of actually like nurturing and self-care and self-love and all that.
How does that work, and what are you aiming for?
I think gaining relationship with my thoughts is very valuable, because your thoughts create your form. Like the pull-up bar you have in your house, or the squat rack you have, or the kettlebells, or whatever it may be, like that started off as a thought.
Yeah, totally.
And then that or the postural patterns that you express. There's been various different research around how postural patterns impact the way that we think and feel. Like one in San Francisco University, they did some research with two groups of students, and one they had them hunched over into a position. In the book we call it the Mopey archetype. So they're hunched over in that position, and they're saying, okay, like I want you to think back into some memories and kind of see what comes up. And they found that when you're in that kind of hunchy, slouchy, morose type position, oh, wow, you access more depressive memories. Imagine that.
Yeah.
When you are in more of this upright, we call it the aligned archetype position, superwoman pose, like the Amy Cuddy Harvard research stuff with the testosterone and cortisol. If people are familiar with that it was affected the way that people produced various different hormones, their postural patterns. All of a sudden, they go into more like optimistic, uplifting memories. Wow. Yeah. Crazy, and so what that is we're continually, this with music, there's certain songs, I know, Abel, that will make you feel a certain way.
Absolutely.
And it'll tap you back into like, okay, cool. Maybe before a podcast, I put this song on, or before a football game, I do this, or, whatever it may be, public speaking. I'm like, okay, I got my song. It psychs me up. It anchors me into like, I can do anything.
Yeah.
Or then maybe you have like your sensual music or whatever it may be. It anchors you to those sensations. Well, postural patterns are also anchoring you to physiological states. Tony Robbins and neurolinguistic programming, all that stuff gets into this. I did a Tony Robbins event recently. It's like before you walk on the coals, he's like, you got to do your move. So he's like, show me your move.
What's your move?
Chest. I hit my chest a few times.
That works.
I felt kind of stupid doing it, but I did it.
It works. The chest thumping, it actually works.
And I was in like Tony Robbins's line going through the coals. So like before, he's like, all right, Aaron, like, show me your move. I'm like, all right, Tony. I burnt my feet. I didn't believe it.
Everyone does a little bit, right?
I don't think I believe it. No, some people don't. But within that, though, there's relevance to this. We're circling back. That move is a postural pattern that you are anchoring to this physiological state to put you in this ready place to be able to walk across these coals and not burn yourself, which is a practice that's done, I think, particularly in Polynesian areas. It's been done. It's like a ceremony tradition. Is it Polynesian? Am I making that up?
I don't know exactly where it's from. It's from a lot of places if you go back far enough, as I understand.
Right. Yeah. But anyways, it's rite of passage is a great thing to have in our culture that we don't have it as well. I think that's an example of that.
Getting your smartphone is probably the biggest one that people have now. And that's not even a joke anymore. That's so
true. Yeah,
it's really
true.
Crazy to think about. It's like, I don't want a car. Just give me my smartphone. Really? Come on.
Right. Yeah. How do we know that we're adults? How do we know that we're, you're I don't know. Do you have a moment in your life where you're like, I'm a man. I think I'm a man. Have you experienced that?
It comes and goes. But no, right? That's the weirdest part. Actually, it was on the podcast years ago that I asked Melissa Jewel Wan something about that. And she brought up how I think she was like 49 at the time. And she's just like, the weird part about like putting years on is that you still feel like a kid. No one tells you that like you never stop feeling like that. And so that's really cool to embrace that as the years do go on. But what you also realize, and kind of what I was getting at, is you start to change your archetype over the years. You have to, because you can't always be like the young football player who just has all this muscle just shoveling pizzas into your mouth. You've got to evolve. You've got to adapt to the way that the world is. You need to undo some of the damage that comes from stooping and looking at phones, right? You got to go back and do all of the opposites, we have to engineer our life to undo the damage of our environment at this point, which is pretty tricky. But one thing that I think you're good at, and take this as a compliment, please, is the weirdo part. Is just like being willing to be the different one or group of people in a room or in a movement or in a whatever that's just willing to stick out. You're tall and muscular, so you stick out anyway. But like it really embracing that weirdo quality is something that you mentioned in your book, and I think I bring it up over and over again, because if you don't do that, you're going to be steamrolled by all of the questions, criticisms, judgments that come from eating vegetables in public, or like doing a deep squat when you're not in the comfort of your own house, and like, you know, putting your hands above your head, and people will be like, why are they doing a yoga pose? Oh my God, is that a tree pose? That's so weird. And it's not weird.
Well, the thing is, it is weird, and I think we could take back the word weird, because we're talking
let's take it back.
So I mean, literally the original meaning of weird is an old English word. It's WYRD, and it means fate, or to be in control of one's fate. You know, so if you're a weird person in a culture. I was talking with a friend. She lived in Israel for like 7 years. We were just talking yesterday. She was saying, this is from my friend in Israel. She was saying the word in Hebrew for crowd, I don't remember what it is exactly, but essentially translates to a group of ignorant people. You know, so when you have a crowd, naturally you'll have this kind of like, think of like, I don't know, like a rave, or people are
herd mentality.
When you get groups together, that herd mentality, it's like whatever, you know.
No one's smart in a stampede.
You just bro, go.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, if you're the weird one, you're in control of your fate. You're saying, I don't know about this stampede running off the cliff right now. Like, I'm not really sure. And if you look at normalcy statistically, which statistics, there's like there's a Mark Twain quote. He said there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics.
That's right.
You know, so I never know about statistics, but nonetheless, the echo chamber of statistics that I happen to occupy resides around, like, statistically, you know, Westerners are becoming obese at scary rates, and they're becoming anxious and depressed, and suicidal ideation, and amongst adolescents, and all these things are just like scary. You know, so that's that crowd, you know, and so for you to be the weird one is actually a high compliment, and it actually puts you into a position of, again, this is pretty grandiose, but somewhat of like a revolutionary. You know, if you're the person that's willing in a culture that's peeing their pants, you know, and adult diapers are exceeding that of baby diapers at like a scary rate.
Right.
And you're the person that's going through a deep squat while you're at the airport, instead of hunching over your chairs, staring into your cell phone. You're very weird, but you're also potentially setting an example for the rest of the people in that room to create space for them to explore their own body in a way that's actually very healing, and could, you know, in a more immediate level, prevent them from creating a blood clot that could kill them.
Right.
You know, and a more like global long-term level could just start instilling more playful habits into their lives that makes them feel more embodied.
Dude, that's such a great point, especially just I'm imagining you doing a deep squat at the airport right now, but a cool thing happens. It's almost like the first person clapping, right? It's like no one's clapping and it's not happening. And then you're just like, maybe someone should clap here. And someone starts, and then it's just like uproarious. Similar thing happens. If you notice, we all are always like scanning for threats in crowds and whatever. And we're just kind of looking around whether we realize it or not. If you see someone standing up and just, you know, doing some stretching and loosening it up and doing some squats, then someone else starts doing it, right? And then someone else starts doing it. Then it becomes like a safe space, you might say, to like move freely and just kind of get loosened up for a minute. And that's a really cool thing when, and you do realize that, I think, being the weirdo is you're different, people are paying attention. And then if you're doing it right, ultimately you kind of do become that leader by example, but you have to take that hit at first because the first thing that hits you is going to be the judgment, the, you know, just kind of like weird questions and people seeing you as a threat because you are different from the crowd of lemmings that are jumping off a cliff right now.
And then, but within that, in order for you, so I, in some ways, have it easy because I happen to have been birthed into a form that is accepted culturally as being symmetrical and fit. And so I'm in a position where, like, if I'm doing something, it's like, well, there's a good chance, you know, that I'm in as far as how it would be perceived, like, oh, that guy's in good shape. Perhaps
Sure.
what he's doing is working.
Sure.
What about for the people that are just getting on this train?
Yeah.
The people that aren't in really good shape, and they don't have 6-pack abs and all this different stuff, and they're going in that weird direction. Like, I have a lot of empathy and compassion for that person.
Sure.
It's like, man, I want to get on this thing, and I want to start, respecting myself and kind of like occupying myself in a deeper way. But I don't just fit into this form. So the judgment feels much stronger because maybe I don't even know if I'm necessarily am doing the right thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, the book comes in, or books in general. There's a lot of like Kelly Starrett did a good book as well. The Supple book and Deathbound, all sorts of ones. There's a lot of different there's a lot of different people out there that have been taking cracks at this stuff. And I think getting that information from reputable resources that you can trust and learning that stuff, like investing in knowledge.
Yeah.
So that when you are in those situations, you're like, I know that you think this looks a little funny, but I know my stuff. Like, this is, I know where I'm going with this.
Right.
And I think that if you know where you're going, or at least you think you know where you're going, because who really knows? I think perhaps that's some degree of like rite of passage into womanhood or manhood. Maybe, I don't know. I'm still playing with the idea.
Well, even this morning, it's like I went out in the sun and did my like silly qigong moves that look really silly from the outside looking in. And I'm aware a lot of the time, if you do that at a public park or like even where we are right now, we can be seen by people if they want to look out their window, they're walking their dog or whatever. And it's like, what is that guy doing? Like shirtless in the sun when it's like 30 degrees or whatever and the wind is blowing, just like doing these weird moves. What's that about? And you get more people just kind of looking at you. But what I've noticed is that if you stick with that default, those people who are just looking, it's like, that's weird. A lot of these people can't really get out of their cars. Like if you go to the grocery store or something like that, or like a parking lot, just notice. This is a weird thing that I do that I'm sure you do too. It's just like you walk in a room and you see the furniture. It's like, I know the shape of the people who live here.
Yeah,
or you just like,
man.
you go to a parking lot. It's like, man, people are almost like my age, maybe even a little younger, and getting into and out of their sedan looks like it's a real rough time, and that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's where, and so things that people can, like, somebody recently asked me, I have an online program that's also called Align Method, and someone that was a user of it, they sent me this message saying like, man, it's really great. I love it. I would really love some type of addendum for how to take care of a child. And how to, like, the postural patterns of holding a child, and because I have this neck pain and shoulder pain and all this different stuff, and I'm like, well, yes, I can do that. And I have a sneaky suspicion that a lot of this neck pain and shoulder pain and, headache and whatnot that you're experiencing is in large part stress induced.
Yeah.
Because that stress in your life and not getting sleep and, all the different things, financial stressors, very, very well likely, possibility, all that ends up manifesting in a physical way. And so people can start to bend their perception of what this physical experience is beyond just biceps, pull-ups and tricep kickbacks or whatever, and get into like, well, the way that I use my eyes could actually be the difference between me being in a really sympathetic kind of fight, flight, stress state, or more in this parasympathetic kind of calm, rest, digest type place. Yeah. And so there's a chapter in the book about sight, and the way that's literally, we're moving our physiology just with the way that we use our vision. And when we're looking out into the distance, taking in the panoramic view, we're literally putting our whole physical form into more of this place of like, okay, cool. Abel is calm. He's looking over the savannah. He's taking it all in. Okay, it's a good time to rest. Yeah. It's a good time to repair muscles. It's a good time to go in and kind of like get into that backlog stuff. But if all of a sudden Abel is focusing in on a predator or a prey, maybe he's pulling his bow back and he's putting all his intention right into that point, it's not really a good time to work on, a woman's, menstrual cycle or some type of tissue damage. It's not the time for that. I need all hands on deck. We got to get that animal, or zucchini or whatever. And in our world, modern world, we are statistically, it seems like it's pretty stressed out, and physically, mechanically, it seems like we are staring into screens in this myopic way. It seems like we're inside walls that are closing us in. So our vision is always kind of a little bit contracted. Over 90% or 90% of the time of most modern Americans is spent indoors. So all that time that you're indoors there, your eyes are partially contracted. Those ciliary muscles is what they're called, are partially contracted to refract that light so you can bend it so you can actually perceive it. When you look out into the distance, those muscles relax. We relax muscles at any level. We relax muscles at the other levels. And so just the simple act of going outside, looking up into the trees, looking up into the clouds, maybe allow your creativity to kind of bend a little bit, and maybe imagine the cloud as a zebra or giraffe or something. Allow yourself to be more playful from the inside out and flex those visual muscles, and all of a sudden you start to heal yourself at a physical level. So that's a form of fitness. Fitness doesn't just need to be CrossFit workouts where I'm sweating and I'm puking at the end of the workout. Fitness can literally be like, oh, I checked my emails on the ground, sitting on like a poof on a comfy rug, on like a low coffee table. And then I took eye breaks and looked out the window. And then I even stacked some more variables and I opened the window. So I'm getting that full spectrum of light coming through, and I'm getting all the, the phytoncides and all the good chemicals coming off of the trees to help boost my immune system. And
this stuff works.
It works.
It's just a bunch of words, but this stuff works.
All I'm saying with all of that is we have opportunities. We have a whole plethora of opportunities all the time. And we, for the most part, weren't constructed or built or educated with the eyes to see them.
Right.
There's like I start the book with the Joe Campbell quote, like we're fishing for minnows while we're standing on top of a whale, and like the whale that we're standing on is, some of the things I just mentioned, but I would say movement is a primary one. I would say we are moving ourselves into a more depressed in the literal sense of the word, pulled down state. And depression is the number one leading cause of disability worldwide. It was supposed to happen by 2020, but it already happened. And so it's like, okay, cool. Well, is that the phthalates, or is that the EMF, or is that the, GMOs? Why isn't anybody talking about the mechanical part of it? Of we're literally moving ourselves into a position that if you take the phone out of people's hands, you Photoshop it out, a photographer did that, and you look at people as they're hanging out in their bed with their partner, as they're, sitting in a bus stop, take the phone out, you look at that person, they look kind of like sad.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And at first, actually, when I started doing the podcast, I noticed that. And I thought maybe like people didn't like me. But what they're actually doing is they're getting Skype going, or they're getting their computer. They're just like deeply concentrating. And that looks like a scowl at first.
Right.
And so like for a weird virtual.
That sensation.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. You feel it though. It's like, oh my God, they're scowling at me. But if for example, you're sitting on a hotel bed with your significant other and you're looking at your phone and you're frowning, you have to get out of that frown to look at them without them thinking that you're, disapproving of them to some degree. You need to realize that you're in this shape. You need to get out of it, change your state before you can start actually interacting with real people, right? It's a very bizarre thing, but people are starting to get their social skills are kind of like stagnating and then getting worse because they're not being practiced, right? Because people are like startled by actual human interactions now. You like walk up to the counter at Starbucks or whatever, and just like they can't even talk because they're so startled to see an actual person. I don't know if you're seeing that where you're at, but it's crazy. It's like people are getting more and more socially awkward as time goes on.
Yeah. So there's also, what you're saying, I think, is immensely powerful as far as the potential impact if we do start to pay some closer attention to that. There's research of when you put a golf tee in and around your eyebrows, and so that it forces you to create that scowl position. You literally perceive the world in a little bit more of like an angry, kind of annoyed type way. Similar thing. This is all in the book. Put a pencil in between your teeth. Yeah. Forces a mechanical smile. All of a sudden, it puts you that way. Right, exactly. All of a sudden, because you're mechanically turning all those muscles on in that position that you've anchored over at least your lifetime, likely, millions of years, when you go, it's an indication like, oh, I feel kind of good. This is like I'm happy. And so when you turn those muscles on in that way, it causes people to all of a sudden smile back. It's like when you're smiling, the whole world smiles back at you.
So stop scowling at your phones, guys and gals.
Well, stop staring at your phones and pay attention to, one, we're always attuning to each other, mirror neurons. We're always, when you send me a face of some sort, I'm going to process that in the way that I am able to actually really create deep rapport and connection. This is a great tool for connecting with people. People trust people that are like them. So if you have more physical adaptability, I call it the fitness of empathy. So if you have more physical adaptability with your facial expressions and your postural ranges of motion and the fluidity within them, then you're able to connect with a larger group of individuals, as opposed to the person that is, say, like, all they do is yoga, or all they do is CrossFit, or all they do is like military crew cut guy or whatever, or Buckmaster rifle guy, what have you. If that's their thing, they have that one kind of somebody personality identity type, it's really easy for them to get along with people in that genre of avatar. But once they go out of that, they feel very uncomfortable. Well, those are physical patterns that they haven't really adapted themselves to. But if you can speak dance, and you can speak yoga, and you can speak improv, and you can speak military and CrossFit, you can go into those worlds and find this common thread of connection and rapport with anybody. Yeah. But it's a movement conversation, amongst other things.
That's really interesting. But it is. If you look at that's one thing that's cool about living in the Rockies is you get to see a ton of animals, not just see them, but see them interact with each other, and herds of animals. Like we had the herd of elk bugling and coming through the other day. It must have been like 200 of them. Just amazing. But you start to see humans that way. You can't help it. It's just like you see crowds of humans and herds of humans kind of the same way. And you see that they're all definitely doing this little dance together. And a lot of times it's pretty ugly because they don't know. They're not aware of it, right? They haven't embraced that thing about, oh, we are all dancers. We're all singers. We're all integrated, right? One before we're running out of time, but one thing you also mentioned in your book that I really appreciated was the whole part about singing and speaking and the integration of all that. And James Lugo, who was a coach on American Idol, and I've taken some singing lessons from him. He's also been on this podcast. He talks about it as being just as simply as being placed in your voice. As it's all integrated, it's all one. And you do that really well. It's one reason you have a good voice, and I think it's one reason that people listen to you. But if you were talking like this and kind of, speaking from the more nasally, what I'm trying to say is you have to be standing up correctly as a singer almost in order to place your voice correctly. And if we're in that stooped over position, now I'm in the stooped over position. It's collapsing my diaphragm, right? And I've lost the power of my voice. It's like I sound much weaker. Now I'm back in position. You can place your voice again. But that's one thing that you teach kind of throughout everything that you do, that it's not all these separate parts that we need to go down these rabbit holes freaking out about. It's like, no, we need to come back to center.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that was the goal of the book, was to break it down, realizing that every aspect of your life is a form of movement, and there's basic fundamental principles that you can integrate and learn really quickly, and you can start to instill those principles into most activities that you do. You don't need to learn a new program for every room that you're in or exercise that you're in. There's basic principles that we can utilize, and those principles stem into exactly what you're saying, of literally just communication in general, but the tonality of your voice. Like if you think of like a guitar, and what's the box part called? That's the
whammy bar.
No, what's the guitar?
Oh,
There's
like the
like
sound hold, the whole soundboard, and the
yeah,
thing that
sure,
makes the sound. Yeah.
like that. I don't know the guitar, but if you were to collapse that,
Hmm.
it would completely change the sound of that guitar.
Right.
If you bend it, twist it, turn it, like you are a guitar.
Yeah.
Like these vocal cords. It's the oldest instrument that we've had access to.
Hmm.
And so you can augment and change the sound of the music that you produce through your body based off of your structural inhabitants, the way that you exist inside of your body.
Yeah. Get a good ohm going. You're going to feel it. When it's a good, well-placed ohm, it'll take you places.
Yeah, that's real stuff. Yeah. I mean, and then as that gets into like all like the resonance and sound healing type stuff. And, but also some people find that stuff a little bit more challenging. I understand that. But what's less challenging is just long exhalations.
Yeah.
There's no argument there that long exhalations, i.e. a sigh, you do that, you're like, oh, okay, parasympathetic. We're kind of going into like this rest, chill, let go of stress. That was a let go of stress sound.
We do that, and our dog starts, we go, and our dog lets out a big sigh. They're contagious in a good way, usually, as long as they're not taken the wrong way. Don't sigh at someone the wrong way.
Well, that's the thing, is everything is contagious. And the thing that struck a chord with me as you were talking about being on your cell phone and then looking over at your partner and then giving them that scowl. Mm-hmm. What the heck do you think happens when you are stuck in your computer screen all day long and then you come home and you're with your kids?
Right. Scrunch face.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like, your kids do not care what you say. They care who you are.
Right.
They care what you do. They care the way that you organize your house. They care that the home feels safe. They care that you feel passionate, that you feel like you're following your bliss in like Joseph Campbell terms. Like, if you can teach your kid to live following their bliss, which might be a funny thing to say but whatever, Joseph Campbell's great. So if you don't like it,
it's great. So
deal
great.
with it. Yeah. But if you can instill that quality into your children, that's an education that is absolutely invaluable. And at some point, just like at some point your health is going to be the most valuable thing, at some point following something that feels, more deep and true to your nature, your heart, your truth, whatever words work for you for that, at some point that will be the most important thing. It could be turned into like a midlife crisis because you've packed it down for so long, or you can start doing little drips of that, today, and, be playful, connect with somebody in a meaningful way.
You're a great example of that, Aaron. We're out of time, but please tell folks where they can find your book, your work, and also after that, it would be great if we could end with a quote, because you've got so many great ones in that book. Feel free to share one or two or whatever.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, so thanks so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate your stuff for so long. So it's like truly an honor to get to share this with you, man. And for you to have actually read my book, or, to whatever degree you did, it sounds like, from what you've said, it seems like there was a meaningful amount that you got in there.
You should see the dog ears.
Good. I love that, man. Yeah. I mean, that to me means the world. And that's like the most humbling, flattering thing. So I appreciate it. And so for people, I would say grab the Align Method book would be my one thing that I would suggest. Yeah, there it is. Man, it's crazy how the mail system works. It just gets right out there.
Yeah. Got this one fast. Look at how vascular you are on the cover.
I know. It's a little creepy. So I guess, I don't know, Amazon or bookstores, any place you get your books, it'll be there. And then we just finished the audiobook, which includes a little podcast interlude between me and Phil White, who helped with co-writing. And so between each section, we did this kind of just organic, free flow conversation of like what the chapters meant to us and kind of stumbling blocks and stuff. So, and then obviously jump over and check out the podcast on the Align podcast with Mr. Abel, which I'll just release on the same day.
Righteous. All right, quote time. What do you got?
Oh, quote. Well, the one that we were talking about, we were stumbling on mine before of like, oh, this one about the chain. So I looked it up in the book really quick. And this is Rosa Luxemburg, and it's those who do not move do not notice their chains. I just think that's such a poignant idea in this normal world that we live in. When you do get out of that normal kind of mode of sitting in the couch and looking at the TV screen and doing all that stuff. And at first it feels a little uncomfortable to maybe go wiggle your hips a little bit or do a little shimmy or dance or whatnot. You're just like, oh, I don't know, this isn't me. And then you finally get out of the way yourself to do that, and you're like, I'm alive.
And everyone looks at you like you're crazy.
That's great, man. You want to be crazy in this world.
It's true.
So I think that's we could just leave it at that. I think that's a really interesting thing, that if you do not move, you won't notice your chains. And so I think it's wise to kind of be liberal with exploration and just notice where there may or may not be binds that you might not have even realized.
Yeah. Love it. Aaron, thank you so much for your work. Really proud of you with this new book right here, The Align Method. Go check it out, everyone. All right. We'll have to have you on again soon. Thanks again, man.
I love it. Thank you, brother.
Hey, folks. This is Abel James once again, returning as promised with a special reading from my brand new #1 international best-selling book of humor, poetry, and satire, Designer Babies Still Get Scabies. Let's go ahead and just read the title track from this audiobook, paperback book, and electronic book extravaganza. It's called Designer Babies Still Get Scabies. Designer babies still get scabies, herpes, typhoid, mumps, and rabies. Sure, they might get all the ladies, but designer babies still get scabies. It seems to me just a little crazy shopping for the DNA of your baby like you'd pick a dress or pluck a daisy. It might even be a little bit lazy to declare, "Scientists will save me," instead of, "Look at all the gifts God gave me." All right, this next one is a little bit dark. Hang on. We'll make the last one funny just for you. This is called, These Monkeys Are Part of a Study. Don't you worry, buddy. These monkeys are just part of a study. Sure, the science is a little muddy, and I'm sorry their foreheads are kind of bloody. Right now, it's still a bit buggy. We just want to see if these monkeys get chubby, or if they die, or if their faces get ruddy when we electrocute the brains of everybody. Pretty soon, it'll be millennials and yuppies. But it's not like we're torturing the tails off of puppies. We simply impose our will on their minds, molding them like putty. It's the scientific method, you see, that gives us moral authority. To poke and shock and slice with glee, turning him to her and she to he. Cloning sheep, cloning me, cutting anything that bleeds, lopping off all the parts we don't need. And of course, ultimately, confirming our superiority over absolutely everything we see. So don't you worry, buddy. These monkeys are just part of a study. Okay, one last one, and it's a little mischievous. It's called strip poker. Well, I went all in with a one-eyed Jack, dreaming about those big fat stacks, but as soon as I saw her face, I knew I was done. Then came the flop, then came the turn. You'd think after all these years I would have learned that you'd better watch for sharks or get ready to run. She took every last one of my chips, just another winner who slipped. Then that lady made me strip, right in the middle of the cruise ship. Okay, if you're interested in my new book of poetry, humor, and satire, please go to designerbabiesbook.com. And when you buy the paperback version, then I'll send you the audiobook for free. One more time, go to designerbabiesbook.com. And I always appreciate your reviews, your feedback, and everything else. Thank you so much for the support, and we'll see you soon. This episode is brought to you by Wild Superfoods and listeners like you. Whether you're looking to drop a few pounds, maximize performance for your next competition, or simply stay young and energetic, you need a name you can trust. That's why my wife Allison and I created Wild Superfoods. Our nutraceuticals and cutting-edge health supplements are literally the products we've been taking ourselves daily to upgrade our nutrition and optimize our health for the past 3+ years. And we're extremely excited to say Wild Superfoods is finally ready for you, with much more to come. When you buy from Wild Superfoods, you're supporting a small family business, not a massive faceless corporation. We don't have any investors or stockholders to please, so our priority is you. We want to help you become as healthy as you possibly can be. Also, starting our own family company, it's kind of cool, has made it so we can create these shows for you without outside sponsors clouding our message of health. So if you believe in what we do, please check out Wild Superfoods. We think you'll dig it. And as a listener of Fat Burning Man, you can save over $80 on a one-time purchase or save over $128 when you select the subscribe and save option. Also, you can get free access with subscribe and save to our Fat Burning Tribe coaching and meal planning community. That place is awesome. I'll see you in there. It's usually at least $27 a month. So check out subscribe and save from Wild Superfoods if you want to get the tribe for free. We think you'll like it. So all you have to do is head on over to wildsuperfoods.com to order your very own health boosting goodies for a big time discount. One more time, that's wildsuperfoods.com. Thanks again for listening. Well, hey there, listener. This is Abel one more time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Fat Burning Man Show. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you might be listening to or watching this show right now. And if you have a second, please leave me a quick review for the Fat Burning Man Show. I read every single one of them, and every time you leave a review, it gives us a little boost in the rankings, and that helps other people find this show. And if you can think of someone else who might enjoy and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or a family member. And if they're like, what is this Fat Burning Man thing? That's a really silly name. You could be like, you're right, but here's the deal. We've recorded over 250 episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show with thought leaders in health from all over the world. And so far, we've won 4 awards, hitting #1 in health in more than 8 countries internationally. We have more than 30 million downloads already, but we're just getting started. I can't believe any of this, by the way, and couldn't do any of this without you. So thanks once again. But here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode of the Fat Burning Man Show for free with 0 outside advertisements, no outside sponsors, and no corporate overlords. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. We'll give you a second here just to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes, transcripts, and video and audio versions for all the past episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show for free. Better yet, enter your email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide so you can take your health into your own hands right now, along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free goodies with a bonus surprise straight to your inbox. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening once again, and have a great week.